Hello guys and welcome to the video. This one is going to be a reaction to my prediction win totals for every single NFL team before the regular season has started. Obviously we are post the regular season now, so we have all of these. I am going to not replay my original video because it is so long. I am going to scroll on the bar and then I'm going to briefly talk about like, hey, maybe why this team didn't live up to expectations or why it was spot on and that sort of thing. But without further ado, let's get this started. Obviously, we're going to be going in order from what they are on the screen. This is a video, but these icons will obviously randomly pop up into the win total, and then I'll discuss it from there. Starting off with the Rams. Obviously, with them, we go and they did win 12 games. Obviously, they had the chance for more. We know the Eagles game they dropped, the Panthers game that they dropped. They could have had 14, but they did end up at 12. I think this more shows that their inconsistency. Obviously, they are the fifth best record team in the league. I guess tied that way with the Bills and the Texans, but otherwise kind of living up to expectations. So they were a very good football team this year. Matthew Stafford played very well, Puka very well. Devontae Adams was a very nice addition, but they still were able to get it done without him. And the defense has been pretty good. Obviously a little bit shaky as of late towards the end of the season. We'll see what goes down with them. But kudos to the Rams for living up to at least my expectation this year and not starting off slow and having a consistent season and being able to win across all facets of the season. Moving on, we obviously have the Browns. I'm sure this is going to be one of these that it's like, where did I put them at? Oh, between 0 and 3. Obviously, they won 5 games. They won 5. They exceeded expectations a little bit. You look at some of the games they maybe stole, one against my Packers. I didn't really follow them too closely. Obviously, they weren't a very, very good team. They had Dylan Gabriel. They had Joe Flacco, starting the season. Then they moved on to Shedeur Sanders, who did put up a monster yard game near the end of the year, but otherwise, they weren't consistent at all. But obviously, I was wrong there. No, I guess I didn't really, start to do this. Obviously, at this point, we are 1-1. My record wise, kind of completely forgot about this. Sorry for you guys. But otherwise, moving on, we got the Falcons. Not sure what I predicted here. Moving on with them, I said 4. I said 4-7. This was a team that ended up winning 8. They ended up getting 8. They obviously stole one from like even the Rams. You'd think that they would have been able to beat them here. Obviously, I'm wrong again. We moved to 1-2. Obviously, this team, if we look at them, didn't live up to expectations, but I just have not been a believer. And nothing to me showed last year that like, hey, Penix is going to be the guy. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't great and inconsistent. And obviously his injury is very unfortunate. The defense was off and on. They did address pass rush. I think this is, going into next year that I would say they're probably going to be maybe higher in the win total, but that depends on the coach they hire. But otherwise, they kind of, the Falcons, they didn't really shock me, but they eked out of this 4-7 win column. Moving on to the Chargers. The Chargers are placed in 11-13. This turns out to be just right. They won 11 games. Obviously, some of the games, they start off the season, they beat the Chiefs in week 1, which I did predict them to do. But otherwise, the Chargers this season willing themselves in quite a number of games. I, I just, I see them and I see Herbert getting, the daylights beat out of him, his broken hand, having to carry that team still, even though he shouldn't. At this point they should have some good weapons that are able to somewhat carry the load for him. But the running back carousel they had, obviously the defense was very good. I'm proud of the Chargers. They battled through a ton of adversity this year. Moving on, we got San Fran. I'm wondering what I put here, if I'm being honest with you. Probably not high. Oh, but we do have San Fran. But we do have San Fran high here. I'm not sure why it's buffering here. Obviously, this win total right there is the upper echelon. It's just under 14 wins. You look at San Fran, they won 12 games. They did have a very easy schedule type of thing. I think that looking at them, it's one of these things that, to me, they obviously did it very well this year. CMC did very well. They had a lot of injuries, but they battled through them. So at this point, obviously, looking at this, I am 3-2 on the year. This has been kind of going as I guess I foresaw, as a general recollection of this whole thing, besides a couple of teams that I was a little off on. Moving on, we have Carolina. I'm sure I got this wrong. Maybe not. Or sorry, Seattle. Oh, I kind of breezed through. Oh, okay. Okay, obviously with Carolina, I put 0-3. That was clearly wrong. They were a playoff team. I'm sure a lot of people felt this way. I overall didn't really like their draft, if I'm being honest with you, and that overall, I guess, kind of came back to bite me. Not that they had anybody crazy that kind of came in besides Tedero McMillan, but clearly that was kind of the piece that they needed, and he had a great season, and I definitely was unsure about him and whether the passion he had for the game would affect his ability to take the league seriously. But turns out he's a freak, and I won't underestimate him again. Moving on, we have the Seahawks. I'm pretty sure we just kind of saw this because I scrolled too far. I did put them in the 14 and up category. They did win 14 amongst a couple of other teams that I probably don't have up here. So now we are 4-3, eking just above, 500. And goodness, I'm a little shocked by the fact that I did predict the Seattle this high. Obviously they needed a better QB. I was higher on Darnold than a lot of people, but who knew that their defense was going to be this good and that JSN was going to have the year he was going to have. I thought he'd be good, but top of the league? No, I did not think that. Moving on, we have the Bills. We move on. And let's see, we have 14 plus for them. They did not get 14 plus. They were 12. So now we are 4-4 on this. The Bills, I wouldn't say that they underperformed, but their defense hasn't gotten fixed at all. The defense has been bad without Ed Oliver. It's just kind of one of those things that it's like they don't have a difference maker on their D line. You kind of expect, Rousseau to, maybe step up a little bit, and he's been good, but without a pass rush, without a run defense, with Oliver, without seemingly any guys playmaking ability in the secondary, the Bills just kind of fell flat on that. But hey, at least I gave them props for being a team that, if they did have, a few things click their way, they definitely would have been, up to 14 wins rather than 12. Moving on, we have Green Bay. I'm sure that I put Green Bay pretty high. We all know they won. I know that they won 9 wins. Let's see here. So I did put them in 14 up. Obviously, I was wrong. Obviously, not a good thing. Obviously, it's one of those things that, hey, I'm high on my team. I didn't think it was the most difficult schedule. You look at the defense, you look at the injuries, and definitely an injury plagued season to a lot of starters. Not just Micah Parsons, includes Devontae Wyatt, and includes Tucker Kraft. It doesn't include really, I guess, any other super key focal players, but clearly the offense kind of struggled early. Wouldn't say it was all on Love and that sort of thing, but the rushing attack wasn't the same this year. Jordan Love was a bit better. He cut down on the turnovers, ending the season with 6. But a lot of interchanging kind of parts with injuries to where I just think that, hey, the offense just, it never was at full strength. And it's never easy to do when you've got a circulating and rotating amount of pieces where you're like, what do we have as a finished final product, or, the minimal amount of, talent we have on the field. But otherwise, you know, can't discredit me for, believing in my team, which I think they could have won this if, the injuries hadn't happened. Moving on, we have, sorry, I scrolled back. The Saints. I put low, 0-3. That is wrong. Obviously, the Saints won 6, a lot better than I guess, I thought that they could get. But Tyler Shuck did kind of prove that he was a guy that, hey, he can ball, and I expect him to be the guy going into next year, which it'll bring boon to the fact that they are comfortable with their guy, that Kellen Mond isn't going to have to go searching for another one. He'll have a full off season to be able to develop this QB. And I do really think that it shows him leaving Philly and Philly being in disarray on offense, that he's a pretty good offensive mind. Obviously last year you had the rushing attack that was really sick, but the Saints, kudos to you guys. You played a lot better, and won a lot more games than a lot of people thought. But moving on, we've got the Raiders. The Raiders, I'm not sure what I thought. Oh, of course, we think they're going to win 4-7. They won 3. That sucks. But in any case, the Raiders, good Lord, Geno Smith. Good Lord, Geno Smith. I don't have to say anything else besides the fact that, what are you going to do with an O-line that is that bad? Max Crosby's obviously a great defender, but you don't have many others, and you deactivate Crosby for the end of the year in hopes that you get the number 1 overall pick, which you did get. But yeah, this team just a complete mess. Who the heck knows what they do now, moving on from Pete Carroll. Moving on, we've got the Cowboys. I wonder if I actually thought that they could be a good team. No, I said 4-7. That is hilarious. They won 7 games. Thank you, Cowboys. That is pretty insane to me. Obviously, what was a very fun offense, but one of the most horrendous defenses we have seen. So, oh my goodness me, the Cowboys. And now Jerry, I don't know if you guys heard this, but Jerry said that he wants to retire when he has the most Super Bowl rings of any owner. And Kraft has 6, he has 3. So he would need 4 more, and the guy is 83, I believe. So clock's ticking. That is a dynasty level of championships in the next, like, what, we give them 15 years tops, who knows, right? But the Cowboys, I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. Moving on, we have the Bears. I know I was probably wrong here. There's no way I put the Bears very high. So yeah, I put them at 4-7. That is clearly wrong. They are my 8th loss on this. So props to the Bears. They obviously had somewhat of an easier schedule. They squeaked by a lot of games in Kansas City fashion. The defense was good at taking turnovers away, but not preventing yards. Looking at them for the postseason, I think it's a success that they made the postseason. I think that looking at this, you know, they outperformed expectations. They definitely could have been a team, you know, that could have easily fallen to this, but they didn't. Moving on, we have the Colts, which I'm sure, or maybe I'm not so sure that I got wrong. Let's see where we place them. Oh, we post them in 0-3. So I did not believe in Daniel Jones. Goodness Lord, Daniel Jones definitely made me look like a fool here. Maybe I had too many teams that, you know, in the 3 and under range, but the Colts, I mean, they were controlling the division. They were ahead, ended up getting ousted from the playoffs by the Texans and the Jaguars and finishing 3rd in the division, only ahead of the Titans, which we'll get to in a second. Overall, the season, obviously, you know, Jonathan Taylor, kudos to him. The wide receivers played very, very well. That offense clicked. Obviously, once Daniel Jones went out, it just kind of went into disarray. But moving on, we have the Dolphins. Interesting to see what this game will be like. I mean, what this team will be like. So I had the Dolphins at 8-10. The Dolphins did not win 8 games. They won 7. They had that run at the end of the season where, you know, maybe they could have gotten, you know, 8 wins and saved me here, but they hand me my, you know, 10th, you know, prediction loss here. And overall, just kind of a weird season. Tua didn't do very well. I feel for McDaniels because he did do everything I feel like he could have done to keep his job, you know, but people are saying, oh, perhaps because Harbaugh was fired, they want to go for him. I totally understand that. Harbaugh will be a difference maker. And it's like he's going from one division that, you know, the AFC North didn't contend record wise with a lot of other teams outside of the division this year, but they've you know, it's always been a tough division, and he goes from one tough division to another with, you know, the Bills and the Patriots. If he does go to, if he does go to the Dolphins, so wouldn't say that's out of the question, but I just don't think it's an ideal situation. But yeah, the Dolphins were marred by a lot of things, and it was strange because the defense started to do well near the end of the year, which, where did that come from? They hadn't had that in 1.5 seasons, maybe even more, to be honest with you. But the Dolphins, dirty. I mean, if they hadn't lost Tyreek, yeah, they probably win one more game, if we're being honest with you. But moving on, now we got the Patriots. I did like Drake May. Oh, this is interesting. So I do an 8-10 here. I did like Drake May last year, but I wasn't fully convinced about whether or not you're talking about a team that was going to ascend to this level. I get they had an easier schedule, but it isn't always easy to flip the script from one year to the next to just become a team that wins 14 games, which is the elite tier for wins. If you win, you know, I mean, 13 kind of, you know, is very, very good, but 14 and above is you're winning a game, you know, you're only losing 1 out of every like 5 games you play, which is like once a month, you know, less than once a month pretty much. So, you know, kudos to the Patriots for proving me wrong. Moving on, we have the Lions. I'm pretty sure I was concerned about them. What did I say about the Lions? So I did say 8-10 with them, and they did win 9 games. I guess one thing that they did for me this year. So now we go to 6-11. We're still very close to being able to not have a 500 prediction on these things, but I'm pretty sure I got the Bengals on. The Lions, they did miss their coordinators. The offense didn't click as well as it did. And they just, it's proven now that they're, I don't know if it's the way they practice. I don't know if they practice too hard, but the team is just injury prone, and maybe they push it too hard or something like that. Maybe something needs to be done with their conditioning team. It's hard to know unless it's an internal thing, but the injury bug, hit a lot of players that weren't even injured last year. So maybe it's a team thing. Maybe it is just plain old bad luck. But we move on to the Bengals. I'm sure I was high on the Bengals. Let's see here. Oh, yes, of course. I had them at 11-13 wins. And here is this thing buffering again. There we go. So yeah, at 11-13 wins, clearly they were not that. They were 5 short of 11 with 6 wins. Goodness gracious me. We now have 12 in the loss column for predictions. So, obviously Burrow being injured, that doesn't help. They looked like they were right on their way to 11-13, maybe even 14 wins. Burrow played the way he did last year. 14 wouldn't surprise me. But that defense is so bad, and they had Hendrickson injured a good amount of this year and proved that, hey, this is one of the worst defenses in the league. Moving on, we have Tennessee. I'm sure I got Tennessee right. I'm sure I had them low, 4-7. Kudos to them. They win 3 and they put up fights in some of their games, but yeah, they were not a 4-7 team. I just thought that with the pieces the defense had acquired last year and how they had rebooted it, and with getting a new quarterback that wasn't just going to throw the games away, they'd be able to win more. Turns out that wasn't true. So yeah, there's another one where I add another loss to the column, and it's looking pretty bleak for my record so far. So moving on, we have the Eagles. The Eagles, I'm sure I put them somewhat high out of dismay. The Eagles, though, obviously only won 11 games. I personally thought that, hey, they're in a weaker division. They're going to be able to win most of the games in their division. Obviously, the final week of the season, who the heck? I guess they didn't care type of thing. But, Eagles, just another kind of thing to say, screw you to a guy like me who it's like, oh, I put a lot of stock in you because you won the Super Bowl, and you didn't suffer a lot of changes besides OC, but who could have known that your offense would be this abysmal this year, where you would need, even to get 11, they needed so many games. Like the Rams game is the game that I think about where, oh, look, you've got this team that needed a blocked punt and a blocked field goal returned, and it's like to win a game. It's crazy. I don't think it's going to continue in the playoffs, but if it does, kudos to them that they could be truly a team that wins by their defense. Moving on, we have the Jaguars, a 13-win team. I wonder if I actually called that. No, I didn't call that. I said 4-7. Sorry, my brother John. This team was a lot better than anybody could have predicted, maybe, unless you knew Cohen, or unless you knew he was going to be a brilliant mastermind to finally draw out the Lawrence that we've been missing for years, to give him consistency to make this offense run. Okay, Jacoby Myers, the missing piece. How many things can I say? Just a crazy team that is going into the playoffs hot. And I am actually excited for the Jaguars because I think they can finally get over the hump. And there's not really a team that they need to crazily worry about, if I'm being honest with you. Moving on, we have the Broncos. I highly doubt I had the Broncos as a 14+ win team. I'm sure I had them high. Yep, of course. I have them at maximum of 13. I'm off by one. Would have been 13 if would have been 13 if my Packers had been able to hold on to that game. But of course, that comes back to haunt me once more. A team that their defense started off crazy hot, has done pretty well lately, but another team that, they get these wins in the final quarter of games all the time. Moving on to the Giants. Excuse me for that interruption, you guys. So we're on the Giants. I'm sure a team I predicted pretty low. I wasn't a believer in Russ. Russ clearly didn't do that much for this team. We'll kind of see where they are. Yeah, 0-3. They ended up winning 4, you guys. So screw you, Giants. Yeah, maybe I did put too many teams in the 0-3 column, but in any case, there goes our, potential 500 record, type of thing. What a crazy year it was, them winning 4. I mean, I guess I have the Eagles to blame for that. I mean, the Eagles should have by all rights won 15 games this year, taking that hammering by the Giants that one game. But otherwise, a promising future. I do think Scattaboo looked good. Hopefully he comes back and he's the same guy, not getting as many concussions. Same with Jackson Dart with the concussions. But it's like, clearly this team's going to have a new offensive coach, when they bring in a new head coach and, coordinators and that sort of thing. But overall, I think he's a coachable dude, and I think he threw a pretty good football for a guy that was considered raw out of college. Moving on, we have the Vikings. I'm not so sure, what I would have thought about them with the whole McCarthy instance. So yeah, I had them at 8 out of 10 as well. They obviously proved me right. They obviously won 9 games, like 3 NFC North teams. I mean, pretty nutty. Obviously, everyone finishing above 500. The only thing separating the Packers was that tie. So yeah, we improved to 7-17. Wait a minute. Did we? Oh, and we didn't add the loss for, okay. So, oh, maybe I did put that in wrong, but in any case, we're moving on to the Cardinals. I'm sure the Cardinals weren't a team that I was like, hey, this team's going to really, really suck this year. 0-3. It's one of those things to me that, hey, the Cardinals just really, really underperformed. Yeah, I had them at 4-7. Of course I did. So now we move to this 8-18. The thing about the Cardinals that was obviously weird this year was Kyler Murray. He gets benched for Brissett, or he gets hurt. Brissett seemingly is better, but it doesn't account for wins. It didn't really account for a whole lot of wins and that sort of thing. They only won 3. They were a bottom dweller team. You'd think this team that had, pretty decent talent, they were scrappy in some of their games, but it just all eventually kind of fell apart to where it's like, yeah, this team can't win a game. So, sorry for your season, Cardinals. Hopefully you can get a head coach that turns the culture around in what you could argue is the toughest division of football next to the NFC North and the NFC West. Moving on to Baltimore. I am not excited about this. I can tell you that much. I'm sure. Yep. We had them in the 14+ column. I had true belief in this team. Clearly they weren't very good. And yeah, it just isn't very reassuring about this. So yeah, I'm I don't know what to say. Lamar Jackson playing, the second worst year after his rookie season. The defense being banged up early, but then they kind of get back together, but then they don't get it back together. And I just don't know what to say about Baltimore. I thought they had one of the better drafts, and no one, I think, really anticipated this season, and a very winnable division record wise. But moving on. Now we got Kansas City. I don't think I really predicted Kansas City's downfall, but I did think they were still going to have a winning record. We now have 20 losses on, a year for these predictions. I am kind of thankful because I think with the Chiefs, it's like it'll be a breath of fresh air to not hear them in the playoffs. Even though I think that Mahomes, at least for me, got a lot of my respect, and that because of the way he hustled, the way he balled, and the way he tried to play, essentially the way he plays in the postseason all year, with just not much of a supporting cast. And I mean, the injuries to the O line, by golly, I don't think that anybody could do well with that many injuries, especially to their tackles, where they're especially when they're eventually having to plug in a guard at tackle because of the amount of injuries they had. Moving on to the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, who I'm sure I had winning the division, right? Oh, I put them at 14 too. I just think that they're in with like the weakest division in football. This team is built to potentially win 14 games with the injuries and, the Baker injuries, kind of similar to the Ravens, if I'm being honest with you, where it's like, I just really, really bad. Handing me my 21st, loss of the loss column this year. Ugh. Buccaneers, what could have been. Moving on, we have the Jets. I'm sure I had them low, right? No, I didn't. Ridiculous. I had them above 3 wins. Who could have known that this team would be so bad? I definitely thought that, hey, they would get a bit more wins. They definitely had some wins where it was like, like the loss against the Steelers, where the Steelers barely beat them, barely, and that's a playoff team. It just kind of goes to show what an absurd year it is. And I don't know, they don't fire Glenn. I think overall, it's just asinine, that I thought that, the Jets, unless they have some crazy draft, I'm gonna go into next year thinking like this team is bottom. Oh, the Steelers. Why did I throw them in 0-3? That was actually my final thing with them. I didn't give the Steelers props either. Maybe it just had to do with the fact that, hey, you look at this team and you think, oh, Aaron Rodgers doesn't really have it anymore. He doesn't really have receiving threats. They get rid of. They spent a whole lot on the defense with guys that I wasn't that confident in. I guess I wonder what I actually did say about this, to say that this team was going to get clobbered or something. I guess, maybe it had to do with their schedule or something like that, but they definitely surprised me, obviously. Moving on to Washington. Washington, a team that someone commented on this video saying that I was wrong. There was no way that they were going to be an 8 to 10 win team. The irony of this is that they only won 5 games. So another team that I overshot, with this, and oof. And now the Texans, let's go and take a look here. The Texans, let me see what we had them finishing at. We had them 8 to 10 as well. They were obviously a 12 win team, playing a lot better than I thought, starting the season off bad. So there we end with 25 wrongly picked teams. Maybe I should narrow down the fields a little bit next year. that sort of thing. But overall, this is really horrendous. Obviously, a lot of these teams I didn't really get right. I got a few early, but a lot of these lower, how many teams these lower teams would pull out, I was wrong on, obviously. But yeah, tell me what you guys think of the video. Obviously, this, makes me look like a real fool. Like, makes me look like a real fool, or it just, goes to show you that, hey, this year the league was weird. But I want to thank you all for watching, and as always, go pack go.